Thanks again, Elena, for taking me through some of your planning for sociology. So take me through what you've got planned so far.
Okay, so I'm trying to make my units for sociology using understanding by design that we've talked about in cluster.
Okay.
So I'm trying to plan backwards on these 3 units. I started out originally with 5 units, but I know that our goal was really to try to get about 3 units per semester that are about 6 weeks long. So I'm trying to go bigger picture where I have them more thematic based, so I have a theme overarching each of these 3 units. But what I'm running into, and I run into this with psychology too, is that sociology is kind of like this survey course. So all of these different chunks don't necessarily fit together, and they don't necessarily build on each other. So like if I was going to take sociology in college, it would be like a general sociology class. It would survey all of the different concepts, and then you would have those different concepts in different classes deeper as you went through the major. So I'm trying to hit on those major concepts and the different themes, but then have this bigger overarching picture to get it down to 3 units, and I just don't know if it's going to make sense or if it's going to just seem like chaos within the unit.
Okay, so you started with, you've looked at some themes, and you've obviously reached out and done some research at the college level.
Yes.
And you've got it down to what you thought was pretty much 5.
Yes.
But you feel like you wanted to bring it down to 3. So what were some of the parameters you were using in your mind to get you from either to get your 5 or get from your 5 to your 3?
That's a great question. I actually started with my standards. And so with the behavioral science standards, very few of them actually align to psychology. So there's a ton of standards for sociology. So what I did is I broke it down by the standards and chunked them into what I thought made sense as units. And so I put those into my units and was able to get 3 units out of those, realizing within those I'm going to prioritize probably 4 to 6 standards within each of those units, and then I'm going to have some substandards that might be addressed through like some formative assessments and stuff like that, but those are not going to be my priorities. So my thinking process really is how do the standards fit together, and then how can I come up with an overarching theme based on what I'm seeing with connections to those standards.
Okay, so then as you looked at the standards, you definitely recognized and you grouped those together.
Yep.
And that felt like a good grouping into 3, or did you have that same feeling?
Originally, I felt like the grouping into 5. The one thing I was really struggling with was on the Unit 3 talking about deviance and deviant behavior, which is very culturally based on what deviance is. And I couldn't figure out where that fit. But then I started to realize that it actually has a lot to do with the social justice system.
Okay.
So when I was talking about social institutions, the justice system fit into that. So that was one of the places that I was struggling. But then I still feel like that, even with that overarching theme of social institutions, I don't really see connections, because I'm talking about family as an institution, religion, justice, and a global, whether or not a global government would be necessary as a result of globalization. So I don't know if those 4 things, yes, they fit under this overarching theme, but are they too disconnected to be able to come together for one unit?
Okay. And
I see the connections. I don't know if someone else would see the connections.
All right, so you are the expert, and so you're saying to me as the expert, I'm seeing some connections and I see these overall themes.
Yes.
I definitely know that I have my priority standards, and I'm letting go of a few standards.
Yes.
With letting go of a few standards, maybe that let a few of yours, those topics that you
did.
felt was very important, that kind of helped loosen those topics up.
Yep.
Which is really great. And so you know, or you feel that there are some connections.
I see them. Granted, I feel like they're loose, but in terms of a sociology lens, these can all be considered social institutions.
Okay. So when it comes especially to this unit in particular, you say that yes, there is connections, there are loose connections, and you're feeling like they should be stronger connections, or are you worried that you don't know how to make those connections for kids?
I think I can make the connections. I think I can keep tying it back to the overall theme of social institutions,
Mm-hmm.
but I worry it's going to be going from like one completely different concept in terms of social institutions to another,
Mm-hmm.
and then to another, and then to a fourth.
And you're worried that just jumping from these things,
Yes.
that how am I implementing that, and how am I going to draw those connections?
Yes. So then I'm also thinking about like assessment.
Okay.
So then I'm thinking about what are those assessment components going to look like, and I'm thinking about these. These are probably going to be about a week and a half chunks.
Mm-hmm.
The religion one's going to be a little bit shorter, but I see those, how they could fit.
Mm-hmm.
But then I'm thinking more in terms of like my summative. I want to do like a performance-based assessment or like a PBL or something like that. But then I'm also considering, would they have to show me, because I have all of this different formative assessments, would they have to show me a connection with all of these? And probably not.
So you're saying they have a connection,
Yes.
and I could assess them each individually
Yes.
and make them have a connection, but then trying to force a summative doesn't feel right.
Right.
And you've
Right.
kind of already come to your own conclusion.
Yes,
you don't
that
need
was
that
awesome.
for that unit.
Yeah, so I think what I could do then for my summative assessment, now that I look at this, I'm wondering if I go back to my skills and knowledge, I think I want to go back and look at my standards again, because I don't know that the religion aspect even needs to be on that, because I think actually part of that could go into the family, because a lot of that, when we're talking about family from a sociological perspective, talks about like marriage and things like that. So I think I could tie in some points in terms of the religion aspect into the family values concept, rather than have it be some separate thing. So then they're dealing with less social institutions, because I think it's hard to separate the idea of religion completely from family values, because it tends to be very family oriented.
Yeah.
So I think that would work.
Okay, so then you're talking about going back to your knowledge and skills,
Yes.
and literally looking back at your standards,
Yes.
and looking at the connections between your knowledge, skills, and your standards to know, should I break these apart, or should I not break them apart?
Yes.
And that worked really well for your unit 3.
Yes.
Okay, so
So I
then
feel good about Unit 3.
Okay, good.
Yes,
So
I feel
then-
good about Unit 3. I'm going to look at the religion, and I think I'm going to tie the religion back into the family structure.
Okay. Would this help us with units 1 and 2, that same thinking?
Let's go to Unit 2.
Okay.
Because I worked on that like the last couple days, so I feel like it's more. Okay, so Unit 2 is talking about structures of power and talking a lot about inequality. So it's talking about social structures and like stratification systems, caste systems, different classes in the U.S., inequality in terms of gender, race, ethnicity, and then a unique one is actually age as well. So it takes it more on, we talk about like the difference between micro-sociology and macro-sociology. So I try to incorporate both of those concepts in every unit as well. So like micro would be more right with them, macro is going to be like global perspective. So I'm trying to do more of the with them, so the micro perspective, and then go more globally on inequality with the macro. So the more I look at this one, I think the first sub-question that I have really ties back into just having them understand the ideas of inequality in different social structures. But then question 2, I feels like hits on the micro theme, and question 3 hits on the macro. So that one makes more sense to me now.
Okay. And you have got them down to where you got your overall, and then you've broken it into the micro and macro.
Yep.
So one of the things that helped you with the unit 3 was double checking back to your standards.
Yep.
Do you feel like those are still a strong fit, like you had before, like you saw the connection before?
Yeah. This unit I feel really good about. I planned directly from the standards. So I feel like even all of my sub-questions that I would use to assess formatively on a daily basis, literally will tie back directly to this. So I feel really good about this unit.
All right, so you feel good about your process.
Yep.
And when we went back to Unit 3 and looked back at that process, that helped shine some light on some pieces that you thought were kind of foggy.
Yep.
But now they're a little clearer, and that definitely is happening here.
Yep.
Okay, so we feel good about 2 of the units.
Yes.
Do you want to look at Unit 1?
Yes.
Okay. So
Then I'm wondering on this one if I need to consider the macro and micro approach. Because I feel like that could also be an overarching theme of the whole class. Of something to give them some connections. So...
And micro and macro, does that tie back to your standards? Okay.
Yeah.
Then that would definitely be
Because like the family would be much more micro.
Okay.
But then the idea of deviance and things like that would be more macro. And then I have them go to the global perspective, which would definitely be macro. So I like how I've structured it so far, that they go from micro to macro. I think that's a good theme as well.
Okay.
Okay, so Unit 1.
Yep. Take me through your thoughts.
This one is kind of starts out with having them figure out, how do I think like a sociologist? In the past, I've done like a whole unit on research methods and stuff like that, which the kids just really aren't that into, but there are standards that need to be addressed. So what I've tried to do here is actually address the research standards, but through 2 of the biggest concepts in sociology, which is culture and the idea of socialization. So we're going to look at some case studies and things like that and learn the research methods processes actually through culture and socialization, rather than just learning it as a separate entity and not tying it back in. So this unit will have to do with research methods as well. And so the first part just kind of goes back to, this is where I introduce micro versus macro sociology, right in that first sub-question. So that's going to be something that's going to be transferable to the other units. And then I go into the idea of culture and the idea of agents of socialization. So I feel like macro versus micro sociology on this one actually kind of goes in and out. Based on like, what's your culture, then draw a global connection. How were you socialized, then draw more of a global connection. So I feel okay about that as well.
Okay.
And then I tried for this one, I know I keep talking, sorry.
Keep going, I think that's good.
My essential question, do you think helps tie those together?
Okay. So let's process a little bit what you said. Okay. So you felt like in the past you have started at a different spot. You started with the research.
Yes.
And recognizing that didn't have as much success or as much success as you wanted, that you're going to try a blended piece where you're having them look at those 2 big concepts of the of the culture and the socialization, and you're going to actually use the research to help them look at those pieces.
Yeah.
And so you're actually embedding the 2 together, and you feel like that's going to be a better fit for you.
And I want the skills that we talk about in terms of those research methods to carry over then into the other units as well. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. So then, your big question you ended up with a moment ago was, is this the right question?
Right.
How do we know if it is the right question? What would be some things that you would look at?
Is it something that is essential? Is it something that I really want them to walk away with from this class? So is this like the one big thing I want to assess from this unit?
What do you think?
It's how does our culture and the way we are socialized impact our perspective of the world?
Is that what you want them to look
like? Yes, I just don't know if it hits on enough of like the, how do I think, like, okay, so I have kind of 2 thoughts here. First of all, I like it because it does tie the unit together and it does get to the essence of what the standards are asking. When it says, how does our culture and the way we are socialized impact our perspective of the world? So part of me sees that just by looking at culture and socialization, you are having to think like a sociologist, but am I not being explicit enough in terms of what I'm looking for is, in terms of the perspective is that you're looking at it from a sociological lens? I don't know.
Okay. So you're wanting to know do you need to be more explicit about
Yeah.
this?
Yeah.
Okay. You said that you liked that it was there.
Mm-hmm.
What would it sound like if you were more explicit?
I mean, I think it's literally something like adding, how does our culture and the way we are socialized impact our sociological perspective of the world? But when I think about wanting that to be a little bit more inferential, I could put that later in the performance assessment. So I could say, like, as a sociologist, how do we now, because it's almost like I want them to talk about how would they view things differently. Because really I think it's that mind shift of, like, things like the benefits and challenges of a diverse society. Like, yes, they understand our society is diverse, but have they really ever thought about how does that actually benefit us? Like, even the types of food they eat, the things that they're exposed to, like, just even things that, like, I don't know, they get brought to the Civic Center, like, are so much different because of our diverse society. So I think this could get to the essence of it, and then if I add that into the performance assessment, so I'll just make a note of that, I think I would be there. Yeah, no, I feel good about it. I feel good about it.
So we started with the original idea of, are these my right units? Do they fit the things that I needed to fit in? Where are your thoughts now?
I feel much better. Like, I feel like, yes, they fit. I can see the connections. I think I could justify the connections based on what my standards are. And I feel like the idea that I developed sub-questions and then even sub-questions within that, if I were to take these units and go to, like, standards reference grading, I would feel confident that, like, yes, I know that I am assessing those standards and I am assessing them in a variety of ways. And some of the big ones that are going to be really transferable standards, such as, like, the research methods, I'm using in every single unit. So, no, I feel really good about it. The only other thing I need is to come up with an understanding for Unit 3.
Okay. So then what are your thoughts with your understanding so far? Where would you start?
Again, this is the one where I thought, I see the connections, but social institutions is so vague that I just wasn't sure.
And what brought us together with this unit that made you feel good was what? There was a couple of things that you drew together that you're like, oh yeah, this is still a good unit. What were those things?
The connections between micro and macro. It does tie back to the standards really well.
Okay. So would that help you, as those connections, would that help you within the understandings piece?
Probably.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then what might that look like?
I think it really has something to do with the idea of like, you see within these, some things never really change within family units, so, like, the idea of continuity. And then there's even, like, sociological debates out there of, like, yes, we've become more globalized, but have we really? I mean, trade was taking place between continents hundreds of years ago. So I think it's the idea of continuity versus change in social institutions.
Perfect. Do you feel good about that?
Yeah.
Okay, so then we came together because you were like, I'm not sure
Yep.
what I needed to do. I feel like I haven't got
Yep.
that. What is something that you've learned from our time here that could help?
I think there's a lot of takeaways that I'm going to take to my sociology units as well, because I was having the same issue of it's more of a survey course, so all of these different things don't really fit together and they don't necessarily build on each other, which is kind of different than something like a math class. So I was trying to think about major themes. How am I going to get there? Especially psychology, I felt like is a little bit easier because I can use AP themes to help guide me.
Yep.
But sociology and AP class does not exist. So this was something that was completely different. So I've talked to a few people who've taught sociology and stuff like that and tried to get ideas, but they and everything out there in the research literally just goes through the textbook. And like the chapters are even the same. Like chapter 2 is always research methods. Chapter 7 is always deviance. So I was trying to get away from that and do something more thematic based to really help tie it all together. So I would say I'm going to take that learning and then go back, look at my psychology units and think, am I thinking about it through the same lens? And I think that will make it fit together and feel like I've structured it so that these questions, do they really tie back to the standards? And then how can these drive my objectives and then therefore my assessments? So I feel really good going into the summer to plan this stuff because essentially I have
Angela Pitt, come to the office
my
for a
objectives
message.
written.
Angela
I just
Pitt,
have to
come
put them
to
in
the office,
objective form.
please.
And my skills and knowledge are going to drive that because I already have those verbs in place of what I need to get out of it. So no, I feel really good. Really good.
All right, good.
Thank you.
No problem. Thank you.